Ink-a-dink, 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 ink-a-dink. Wow!
Good afternoon. Welcome back to Progressive Soup, and we're still waiting on Tony, but we've got Basil BuddhaCat here visiting, and Basil brought along all his advertising sponsors. So we're not going to get into that today because we did that last night, and that's enough. No, we're not. We're not doing any more. I don't care. Basil said, meow, meow. Said he's going to cut me in on 10% of the cha-ching just for today, if I'll do his advertising. And no, you know what? If there's time toward the end of the show, maybe I'll do a little bit. But for now, no. We're talking about baseball, and you've got some crib notes here. And hey, what's this? Basil said, well, you talked about said I talked about Marco Rubio last night on the show, Marco Rubio being the third Republican candidate into the race as of Monday. And Monday evening in Miami, Florida, he gave a speech and told everybody that lie about his parents coming here to escape Castro and communism and the revolution, when in fact his mom and dad came to Florida years before Castro even got started on that thing. So it's we started the second show.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, is it still rolling?
You're at 27 minutes now.
Okay, we're already doing the second show.
Oh.
Okay. Oh well, so much for timing and everything. But okay, so where was I? Okay, so Marco Rubio, he's got this narrative that his parents came here to escape Castro and communism, and it's all a lie. And he told it again on Monday night apparently. So he's still playing that lie up. So it's Marco Rubio in. They got the three amigos in already now, and really, in fact, it's two of the three are actually amigos. You've got Marco Rubio, senator from Florida. You've got Ted Cruz, named after the Cruz missile, to show how tough he is on the military, how strong a military defender he is, and a senator from Texas, and a senator from Kentucky named Rand Paul. And Rand Paul is unlike the other two. He's not Latino. He's not Hispanic. He's kind of a white, middle-aged Republican, and I guess he thinks that sets him apart from the average Republican. Actually, I think some sort of fits in pretty well. So anyway, so Rand Paul is the third good dude. He's the third amigo, who's not an amigo, and he's a libertarian, and he thinks that's what sets him apart. He stolen a lot of the good liberal ideas. He's a lot of the good liberal and progressive ideas. He's against the NSA. He thinks that the laws that were passed after 9/11 that allows spying on they say not Americans, but they do. We found that out. Edward Snowden blew the whistle on that one. Says that's got to stop. It'll stop on his first day. But in the same breath, they'll say, damn that Obama with his executive orders. Those are totally unconstitutional, and we ought to impeach him for that. And then a minute later, he'll say, well, you know, if I take office the first day as president, the first thing I'll do is I'll find a way to stop warrantless wiretapping by the NSA. And sorry to say, Rand, the only way you're going to do that, especially with a Congress that's beholden to the NSA, the only way you're going to do that is with an executive order. So, on one hand, he was against executive orders until he's for executive orders. So that's the three of them. And but Basil, he's an equal opportunity nose tweaker. So here you go. He said on last Sunday, Hillary Rodham Clinton made a very quiet announcement. She apparently was sitting at the coffee table having a cup of coffee, and I'll bet it was Cafe Bustelo. I know you can't see me now, so I'll put it back on. Okay, hold on. Okay. Don't want to mess with the microphone. So she had a nice little quiet discussion with a camera at her home in the conservatory, having a cup of coffee, Cafe Bustelo, and it was just her and the camera and 200 million Americans watching on the internet, and 300 million reporters around the world watching on the internet. So it didn't get much coverage at any rate, not much attention to it. But so Basil's looking at his Scrabble board when he was doing this, and he says to himself, Hillary Rodham Clinton, and mysteriously and amazingly, the letters in Hillary Rodham Clinton start to rearrange themselves. And Basil, that's not something you do with a Scrabble board. That's something that happens with a Ouija board. But at any rate, so Basil's watching the letters rearrange themselves, and come up with in many a hell. That's only H and L, but so we're saying hell anyway. In many a hell RR railroad. In many a hell railroad ditch. Period. And left over you have LOL, laughing out loud. So that's one thing. In many a hell railroad ditch, laughing out loud. Then sure enough, a few seconds later, the letters in Hillary Rodham Clinton have rearranged themselves again, miraculously and mysteriously, rearranged themselves again. And now they say, many rich Hilton Dollar, and then in parentheses, Bill. Because I guess she wants everybody to kind of forget about the fact that that conniving, two-timing guy is even around anymore. So he didn't make it. He wasn't at the coffee table with her apparently, and I'm sure that some people will remember him when it comes time to get into the primaries against her, and perhaps even if she should be the as noted self-anointed candidate for the Democratic Party, I'm sure that there'll be a lot of talk about Bill, and there'll be 100,000 reporters in every town, population 300, 100,000 reporters waiting for Bill Clinton to interview him, and somehow or other Hillary is going to find a way to keep him from talking to anybody. Because back in 2008, he kind of messed her up a little bit when he did stuff like in South Carolina after then candidate Senator Barack Obama won the South Carolina primary. Bill Clinton put on his aw shucks voice and said, even Jesse Jackson won South Carolina. And everybody at the time said, why are you bringing race into this, Bill? Why are you bringing a black guy winning the South Carolina primary in to mock another black guy beating your wife in the South Carolina primary? Really, why? What's the point? But so there'll be 100,000 reporters in every cow town standing at the border waiting to interview Bill Clinton, and sure enough, they'll probably each get a 10-minute interview, every one of the 100,000, because Bill likes to be interviewed. He likes the limelight. Not that he's going to be in the limelight too much if his spouse, Hillary Rodham Clinton, wins the presidency. No, he'll just be he'll be back in a room in the White House crocheting for 4 years or probably 8 years, and we'll never see him, will we? So there you go. So many rich Hilton Dollar. Well, I guess the Hilton family's got some cashola to spend on a super PAC. And I guess Bill, so it's many rich Hilton Dollar Bill. Bill in parentheses. So that's it. What did you visit us to talk about, by the way? Okay, Basil said, meow, 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 said, came to talk about baseball. Baseball season, it's April. The season's underway. And just want to point out quickly to the people that hate Alex Rodriguez because he's brash and bold and noisy and, thinks he's God's gift to baseball. And how could a guy with only 655 home runs in his career think that? I mean, he's not built like Barry Bonds. Rodriguez is a pretty normal-looking guy physically. He doesn't look like he's been pumped up on steroids. Doesn't look like not only Barry Bonds, but who the other Mark McGwire looked like a gigantic blimp built of stainless steel and muscle tissue. And the other guy, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Jose Canseco was built pretty much like a nuclear bomb with held together with muscle tissue. But Rodriguez, no. So at any rate, Rodriguez starts the season off. He's played in 5 games, and 6 games now as of last night when he hit a 3-run double in the first inning to get the Yankees off to a 14-7 win over the Boston Red Sox. And hey, would Boston be your team, Basil? Would that be your team a favorite because their uniforms are red? You wouldn't want to be cheering for the Yankees. Certainly not the Yankees, because the Yankees don't wear red, they wear blue. So in a Red Sox matchup, if you've got a team out there, Basil, it's got to be the Red Sox, right? Basil said, meow. Said actually, neither. If it's Red Sox versus Yankees, yeah, he'll root for the Red Sox. No big deal. But his team that he favors most of all, well, he's got a couple of them. And unfortunately, they can't play in the World Series because they're in the same league. They're both in the National League. They're the St. Louis Cardinals. And Basil roots for them at a deference for his audio guy, Tweety. And the Cincinnati Redlegs. And Basil's not quite sure where the heck they got the term Redlegs. What are they? Because Red Sox was taken, so they had maybe the Redlegs tattooed their legs red or colored them red instead of wearing red socks. Maybe they were cutters. Maybe they bled themselves and got smeared blood all over their legs, or maybe they just dyed them. Maybe they just colored them red. Or I know everybody out in the audience is saying, "What the?" Or the one guy in back, oh, it's Bill Murray. Hey, Bill. Bill's got his Gigundo fork, and he's saying, what the? Okay. Oh, Lil. Calico Cat become Calico Stone in the next life, and she's here. So at any rate, so there you go. So the Cardinals and the Cincinnati Redlegs. Okay, yep. Okay. Basil said, meow, 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 meow. Said, and any other team that happens to have red as their color. So I can't even think of it. There's 32 major league teams. Arizona Diamondbacks have some red in their uniform. Philadelphia Phillies are principally red and white. So it's a little milder coloration of red. But I guess that qualifies. The Cincinnati Reds are a little bit darker red, and the St. Louis Cardinals are actually the same shade of red as the graphics on your show. Because Basil has got graphics on his show, and he uses red with red outlined and with black outline, and so that's really, in fact, would look more like the colors on the St. Louis Cardinals uniform. So, baseball. Okay, you talked about harmonica, Phil Linz, not harmonica Phil Rizzuto, but harmonica Phil Linz and the famous Bus Infinite in 1964, at the end of the season, where a couple of pranksters by the name of Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford. Phil Linz was playing his harmonica in the back of the bus, and Yogi Berra, since they just lost a doubleheader to the White Sox, who they were trailing at that point for the pennant, Yogi Berra yelled back, "Shut the up," and shut the to the harmonica too. Now Phil apparently didn't hear Yogi, so Phil asked Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford, who were sitting a little bit ahead of him, and said, "What did Yogi say?" And Mickey Mantle smiled and said, "Yogi said play it louder." And Phil Linz did, and the next thing you know, Yogi Berra's back of the bus saying, "What the?" And suddenly, harmonica Phil Linz has a mouth that's shaped like this, except the harmonica's on the inside. So that's what we're doing. Okay, so that's the story from last night. But you said you also wanted to talk about Latino ball players, and I guess Alex Rodriguez, who you mentioned, who got in his first 6 games of the season, has a home run, a double, driven in 5 runs in 6 games, which is pretty good for a guy that doesn't look like Barry Bonds or Mark McGwire or Jose Canseco or Sammy Sosa. It's kind of a skinny guy compared to them. Knocks in 5 runs in the first 6 games, and the Yankees only won 2 out of the 6. But there's any guy that knocks in 5 runs in 6 games. That's a streak. That's a good streak. Okay, so Rodriguez was born in New York, but I think his heritage is Puerto Rican, I think. And then he went and played high school baseball at a Catholic high school in Miami, Florida, and directly out of high school signed with the Texas Rangers. And no, he signed first. I'm sorry, I take it back. He signed with the Seattle Mariners first, and tore up the league as a Seattle Mariner on one of the better hitting teams of all time. And you have to look it up. I can't remember who they were. I don't think he might have been with them then. Yeah, the guy the Yankees had last year, Ichiro. Ichiro might have been on that team too, but they had guys, Edgar Martinez, Ken Griffey Jr., who Alex Rodriguez passed a couple years ago when he was playing, before he missed the year last year from the suspension. But he passed Ken Griffey Jr., who had 633 lifetime home runs. And now, do Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. have the most home runs of any father-son combination, or is it Barry Bonds and Bobby Bonds? Undoubtedly, they're the 2 largest totals for familial players in Major League history, and I'm sure that some statistician out there will correct us if we're wrong, but Barry and Bobby Bonds and Ken Griffey Sr. and Ken Griffey Jr. for the Cincinnati Reds. I think Bonds and Bonds is the highest total for a father and son or 2 family members ever, and it's probably second on the all-time list would be the Griffeys. Okay, no, that's Griffeys, not Griffins. Basil's still thinking Super Bowls from 2 years ago. The Super Bowl show we did where all the players were, Petrel Manning and the rest of them, and Russell Martin and Plover Martin and the rest of them. No, Griffin, not Griffin, Griffey. Okay. So Latin ball players. So we really counted on Tony being here to tell us who all the great Latin ball players are. But you can start with Roberto Clemente. And you can move on to Tony Oliva, who played for the Minnesota Twins in the 60s. And Tony's actual name was Pedro. And the reason why he went by Tony Oliva was because Pedro Oliva stole his brother's passport, his brother Tony's passport, and snuck out of Cuba and came to the United States and became a great baseball player, Hall of Fame, Tony Oliva, and a good player. And Pedro, well, I think Pedro might be shining Fidel Castro's shoes and maybe polishing up the headstone for future use. So we're gonna apologize to Pedro for Tony. Perdóneme. Okay. So Tony Oliva, we had Roberto Clemente, who was certainly one of the great ball players of all time. Although the funny thing is that when he came to America, well, actually he was born an American, but he's of Dominican descent, and as you might recall, he died in the prime of his career, flying in emergency medical supplies to. It may not have been the Dominican Republic. It may have been Haiti. It may have been another Central American country, but he was in the process of flying in emergency relief supplies to people that had been struck, I think, by an earthquake and a hurricane. No, it could have been a hurricane because it was in December. It was struck by an earthquake, and he was flying in emergency supplies, and the plane went down, and Roberto Clemente's career ended. Right after he had played in the 1971 World Series. I think he was the MVP of the series. Either he or Willie Stargell were the MVP of the series. But Clemente was ridiculed a lot early in his career because he had some serious back problems and occasionally couldn't play. And I guess the white baseball audience didn't really give him much slack for that, and talked about how that Hispanic player was dogging it. No, wasn't dogging it. He played in a lot of pain, played great, played in some postseason. Pittsburgh didn't make it into too many postseason games, but 1971 against the Baltimore Orioles, they did, and they won. And there was some guy from Pittsburgh that hit 3 home runs in the first game of that World Series. Can't think of his name. See, if Tony were here, Tony could help us with that. Tony! Okay. So at any rate, so Roberto Clemente, 1971 in the regular season, he got in his 3,000th. He reached the milestone of 3,000 hits in his career. Still a fairly young guy, still a lot of time left to play, and as it were, he didn't have a lot of time left to play because of his great humanitarian efforts. He died in a plane crash and never played again. And so Clemente, reach out to you. Do you see? Basil's way ahead of me. He knows I was going to ask him that before I even asked it. And he said. Yep. Basil plays catch with Roberto Clemente up in the hereafter. He says he tries to play catch with Lil also, but Lil is the Roberto Duran before there was a Roberto Duran, or after Roberto Duran. Lil is not just hands of stone, manos de piedras. Lil is Lilith of stone. Whole thing, right on down to her tail, and maybe that's one of her ears. Now as a stone, I don't know. She doesn't look anything like a cat anymore, but this is Lilith. Trust me. So you play catch Roberto Clemente. So yeah, okay. And Basil says he struck out Babe Ruth 3,000 times in the last 2 minutes while we weren't looking. So Basil's pretty good at baseball. He says he distracts Babe Ruth when he's pitching against him up there. said, Babe Ruth, when he started out, was a pitcher. And a pretty fine pitcher. Matter of fact, he held the record, the World Series record, for most consecutive shutout innings that Whitey Ford broke in 1962. That record was owned by Babe Ruth prior to him. Babe Ruth was not just the hitter of all hitters, but he was one of the pitchers. He might have been the pitcher of all pitchers if he had continued as a pitcher. So that's why Babe Ruth is the greatest ball player of all time, because he was a great hitter and a great pitcher. And his prodigious home run totals came at a time when pretty much nobody else besides he and Jimmy Fox. And Basil tip out to Jimmy Fox, said, Fox, you can't strike Fox out. You can strike Babe Ruth out anytime, but it's having trouble figuring out how to work its way around Jimmy Fox in the up top baseball games. But at any rate, so Babe Ruth, when he was a pitcher, he had a problem early on that whenever he was going to throw a curveball, he would stick his tongue out of his mouth. It's kind of and the batters, of course, picked up on that. Up tongue, here comes a curveball, and just gave him a little bit of an edge on Babe. But Babe figured it out and ended up being, again, he was on his way to being one of the great pitchers of all time when they switched him over to being a hitter, and the rest is history. Struck you out 3,000 times in a row, Babe? Said, yeah. Wait, hold on. Oh my God, hold on. It's the big phone. Hello? It's Babe Ruth, and he says, yeah. Says, I might be important enough to get in on the big phone, on the cat in the hat phone, than the Basil Gigundo phone, but that cat's got my number. Thanks for calling. And Basil says, meow, meow, meow. 3. That's his number. That was Babe's number. Okay. So at any rate, so that's going to be about it for talking about baseball. I mean, the season's over. The season's off. The spring training's over. The season off to a great start. Yankees 2 wins, 4 losses. Mets 1 win and about 10 losses. And so it's going to be a tough year in New York. But somebody's going to be in the World Series, and Basil's obviously hoping it's the St. Louis Cardinals in the National League Championship Series against Cincinnati Reds. And I know who you're going to be rooting for to be playing against the St. Louis Cardinals, and that undoubtedly will be the Detroit Tigers. And with that, this has been Progressive Soup. I'm David Stevenson. Basil BuddhaCat, guest shot, getting ready for Cinco de Mayo. And he promises that Budweiser beer, when Basil has Budweiser as his sponsor, that Budweiser beer will be the beer of choice of Cinco de Mayo. No more Corona. And any other holiday that the Cruz is the beer of choice, no longer Budweiser. Basil promises that to you folks at the end.
They say they'd rob your grandma blind on Wall Street, fritter her away her Medicare on Wall Street. And Pharma Oil and their pet fox don't care if she lives in a box, so long as they wear platinum jocks on Wall Street, Meow.